work remotely as a software engineer. Since I deal with code and data all day, I've never bought into ghosts or stupid urban legends. I'm the type of guy who will always find a logical explanation for every weird noise in the house instead of hiding under the covers. But I decided to write down everything that happened to me last Friday night. That experience completely shattered my logical view of the world. I'm telling this story because I know that if a stubborn skeptic like me is too terrified to sleep, then what happened that night definitely wasn't just my imagination. Early last month, I signed a lease on a small, isolated house at the end of a cul-de-sac in suburban Ohio. My goal was to find absolute isolation. I needed to hyper-focus on finishing a massive project within 30 days, and I didn't want anyone bothering me. The neighborhood I chose was mostly retirees. After 8 o'clock at night, the whole block would fall into this dead silence, so quiet you could hear the wind whistling through the door cracks. On that fateful night, my area got hit by a massive storm. The rain was pounding on the roof, and lightning just kept tearing through the pitch-black sky. Even with the terrible weather outside, I felt totally safe and cozy working inside my locked house. There was only one minor thing that happened earlier in the evening, right before the storm really hit. I opened the back door in the kitchen to quickly toss a trash bag out onto the porch. Just as I threw the bag, a blinding flash of lightning struck, followed by a deafening crack of thunder that made me jump out of my skin. I immediately yanked the heavy wooden door shut and walked straight back to the living room. Everything happened so fast and it was so loud. Even now, looking back on it, I honestly can't say for sure if I actually manually turned the deadbolt or not. The clock struck exactly 2 in the morning, and my empty stomach started growling. I decided to pull out my phone and order a burger through a food delivery app. About 40 minutes later, my phone screen lit up with a notification that my order had been delivered. Almost at the exact same time, I heard 3 heavy knocks coming from the front door. I stood up, stretched, and went to open it. Out on the porch, there was only a soaking wet paper food bag sitting on the welcome mat. I looked around in the pitch black, but there was absolutely no sign of anyone. There was no sound of a car engine, or any headlights shining from the main road either. But with my usual logical mindset, I quickly reassured myself the driver must have sprinted back to his car to escape the pouring rain. I grabbed the soggy food bag, walked straight into the kitchen, and flipped on the bright lights. As I carefully took the burger box out, something unusual caught my eye. There was a yellow sticky note pressed firmly onto the lid of the box. Scrawled across the paper was a message written in bright red ink. The note read, "You forgot to lock your back door." My heart skipped a beat, but my rationality immediately pulled me back to reality. I scoffed and figured this was just some sick joke from a bored delivery driver trying to scare a customer. To prove myself right, I grabbed a small flashlight and walked straight to the back of the kitchen. I shined the light on the lock of the wooden door I had opened earlier that evening. The brass deadbolt was still resting obediently in the locked position. I let out a sigh of relief and shook my head, chuckling to myself. I had almost let a cheap prank scare me inside my own home. Just a few minutes after I returned to the living room, my phone suddenly vibrated once. It was a text message from an unknown number. The sender claimed to be my actual delivery driver from the app. The message read, "I'm sorry, sir. A large oak tree at the end of the alley was just struck by lightning and is blocking the road. So my car can't get into your neighborhood. It's raining too hard, so I had to leave your food bag at the bus stop out on the main road. The app is glitching and won't let me cancel the order. I hope you understand." After reading those words, cold sweat started pouring down my forehead. I stared blankly at the soaking wet paper bag sitting on the kitchen counter. It wasn't wrapped in any protective plastic layers at all, and it had been placed neatly on the welcome mat right in front of my door. Not out at the bus stop, with trembling hands, I picked up the yellow sticky note and brought it close to my eyes for a better look. The red ink on the paper was still sharp and completely unsmudged by the rain. This proved a horrifying truth. This note was only attached to the food box after the paper bag had been brought into a dry place. The person who brought the food bag from the bus stop on the main road, all the way to my front porch, was absolutely not the delivery driver. He had read my exact home address printed on the receipt. He had snuck around to my back door in the dark to physically check the lock himself. And only then did he circle back to the front to knock on the main door. At this point, This was definitely no longer a coincidence or a hallucination cooked up by my imagination. There was an unknown, faceless intruder directly targeting this house. I panicked, took a few steps back, and reached for the large meat cleaver on the kitchen counter. With my other trembling hand, I pulled out my phone to dial the police. Right at that moment, a blinding flash of lightning tore through the sky with a loud crack. The roaring thunder was followed by a massive power outage that killed the lights across the entire neighborhood. In the pitch-black darkness, over the sound of torrential rain battering the glass doors, another sound rang out. From the direction of the back door that I had personally checked just moments ago, a distinct click echoed clearly. It wasn't the sound of the door hinges being busted in from the outside. It was the dry, mechanical sound of the deadbolt being turned back. Someone had just unlocked the door from right inside this house. He had slipped into my house when I carelessly opened the door to take out the trash earlier in the evening. And now he was slowly unlocking it to clear an escape route for himself. Or worse, he was opening the door to let his accomplices inside. I didn't dare turn my head to look back down that dark hallway. I bolted for the front door, running for my life, and sprinted straight out into the blinding storm. I frantically pounded on my neighbor's door to get them to call the police. 20 minutes later, 2 armed police cruisers arrived, and the officers proceeded to search my entire house. They scoured every single room but couldn't find anyone hiding inside. My belongings hadn't been rummaged through, and there were no signs of any missing property. Everything seemed to have inexplicably returned to normal. But suddenly, the police chief called me into the guest bedroom, which shared a wall with my home office. He stayed completely silent and shined his flashlight directly underneath the empty bed. Right there was a puddle of rainwater and streaks of thick red mud. The officer told me that this specific type of red mud was only found at the active construction site next to the bus stop out on the main road. An unknown stranger had been lying completely still under this very bed for the past several hours. That very same night, I hurriedly packed my most essential belongings and got the hell out of there. I never returned to that suburban Ohio house ever again. I took the hit on breaking my lease and moved into an apartment on the top floor of a high-rise building. I carefully installed 4 heavy-duty steel deadbolts and set up security cameras in every single corner. Even though I am physically safe now, my psychological defenses have completely collapsed. Whenever there is a severe storm outside, my terrible insomnia comes rushing back. The more I piece together the details of that night, the more chills run down my spine. My case was officially closed because there were no casualties or stolen property. The local police just filed it away as an unlawful trespassing case with an unknown suspect. But a series of unanswered questions continues to haunt my mind every single night. Who exactly was that strange man? How long had he been lying dead silent under that bed while I was sitting there typing away in the very next room? How terrifying must his smirk have been in the pitch black of that room, especially during the exact moment he heard my footsteps walking over to check the back door, and then heard me muttering to reassure myself that I was still safe. Tonight, before you drift off to sleep, please do me a favor and double-check your locks one more time. Are you absolutely certain that you are the only one who just manually turned that deadbolt? It happened about 2 years ago, right after I got out of a bad 4-year relationship. I needed a completely fresh start, a truly private space to pick up the pieces of my life. That was why I decided to move into this apartment, a place on the ground floor of a pretty peaceful complex in the suburbs. At first glance, everything here gave me a very comfortable, cozy, and secure feeling. The property was surrounded by lush green trees, clean walkways, and the neighbors were incredibly friendly. I quickly made friends with a few people on my floor, chatted in the parking lot, and started adjusting to my new single life. For the first few weeks, everything was so perfect that I truly believed I had found the ideal sanctuary to heal. My new apartment had a specific layout with large glass windows facing right onto a quiet courtyard behind the building. That courtyard was usually dead silent, with almost no foot traffic except for the maintenance staff mowing the lawn on weekends. Since my apartment was right on the ground floor, anyone standing out there could easily walk right up to my bedroom window in just a few steps. But at the time, I wasn't worried about that vulnerability at all, because the main building entrance always required a secure key to unlock. That strict security at the main gate made me complacent, to the point where I forgot that my own apartment door only used an old-fashioned mechanical lock. I even developed a really bad habit of constantly forgetting to slide the security chain lock inside my front door after coming home from work. I always figured that once someone bypassed the locked door outside, no one else could get near my unit. When I signed the lease, the property manager mentioned that this apartment had suddenly become available. The previous tenant, a woman, had packed up all her things and moved out in a massive hurry in the middle of the month. She even walked away from a massive security deposit without giving any specific reason. I just assumed she was dealing with personal issues or a sudden job relocation on my first day cleaning up the place. While wiping away dust under the shoe rack right by the entrance, I accidentally found a small forgotten item. It was an old plastic keychain shaped like a child's three-leaf clover. The surface was covered in deep scratches, as if it had been dragged across rough concrete multiple times. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just a kid's toy dropped by accident while visiting the previous tenant, and tossed it into a junk box on the kitchen counter. I had absolutely no idea that the presence of that misplaced toy was the very first warning sign of the horrific events about to crash down on my life. Everything started to change about a few months after I moved in. One night, while I was fast asleep, I suddenly woke up to a very strange sound. It was the sound of faint giggling coming from right outside my bedroom window. The room was completely pitch black, with only the streetlights filtering through the gaps in the curtains. I lay there holding my breath, listening closely to see if it was just an illusion from being overtired. The giggling echoed again, sounding crystal clear and incredibly close, as if someone was pressing their face right against the glass. Annoyance overrode my fear, so I jumped out of bed, rushed over, and whipped the curtains open to catch the prankster red-handed. But the quiet courtyard outside was completely empty under the nightlights. There was not a single soul, nor any sign of movement across the entire property. I tried to find a logical explanation to reassure myself that maybe some local kids were just playing a stupid prank. I closed the curtains, went back to bed, and tried to fall asleep without overthinking it. However, this weird phenomenon did not stop there. It continued to happen at the exact same time, around 2:08 in the morning, for the next 2 nights. Every single night at that hour, the faint giggling and the soft tapping on the glass would return. I decided to ignore them because I knew kids' pranks usually stop if they do not get any attention. But I was wrong, as the level of abnormality began to escalate and advanced straight into my private space. By the 4th night, the strange noise was no longer coming from my bedroom window. I was getting ready for bed when I heard the sound of fast, scurrying footsteps running down the hallway outside. The footsteps stopped dead right in front of my apartment door. Immediately after that, there were soft, tentative knocks on the wooden surface of the door. I bolted up, crept into the living room, and pressed my eye against the peephole to look outside. The common hallway was brightly lit, but the space was entirely silent and empty. I did not see anyone standing there, nor did I hear any sound of footsteps running away. Just as I was about to turn around, a soft scratching sound came from the bottom of the door. I stood frozen in place, holding my breath and pressing my ear against the tiny crack of the front door. From out in the hallway, I heard the very faint sound of children whispering. They were talking to each other in muffled words, but their tone was bone-chilling. The situation was now completely defying any normal logic I could use to calm myself down. There were absolutely no families with children living on the ground floor of this entire building. The main door of the building was always locked, and only people with a security key card could enter the hallway. So who were these children, and how could they roam around here so freely in the middle of the night? The soft scratching on the wood and the rattling of the doorknob began to happen much more frequently. With each passing night, a vague terror grew inside me as I realized I was the sole target of those invisible sounds. I remember it so clearly. It was about a week later when I received an email from the property manager while I was at work. Her tone in the email seemed short and formal, almost distant. She asked if I could stop by the main office immediately after work because she had something urgent to show me. I remember being completely stressed and anxious all day long. I kept wondering if my rent check didn't clear or if I had accidentally violated some building policy. The moment I showed up at the office, she told me to lock the door behind me. She started speaking quietly, almost in an eerie whisper. Right then, A security officer from the surveillance room came in and sat right next to me. The manager explained that while the guard was conducting a routine review of the footage, he stumbled upon something horrific. She turned the computer monitor toward me and played the security camera footage of the hallway right outside my door. The timestamp on the grainy video showed exactly 2 in the morning. Out of the corner of the screen, 2 small hooded figures slowly approached my door. Judging by their body size, they looked like children around 10 or 12 years old. They stood completely frozen like 2 statues, standing just an inch away from my door. For nearly 10 full minutes, they just stood extremely close, staring blankly at the peephole with a bone-chilling lack of emotion. Then, one of the small figures reached out, grabbed the doorknob, and started twisting it slowly but firmly. On the camera screen, I could clearly see the metal doorknob being violently jostled a few times, but the door wouldn't budge. After 10 minutes of standing in absolute silence, the 2 kids suddenly skipped away in a bizarre manner and vanished from the camera's view. Witnessing those images with my own eyes made my stomach drop in pure terror. I immediately told them about the giggling outside my window and the knocks from previous nights, but the guard said they checked the courtyard cameras and found nothing. We decided to call the police, and they arrived shortly after to take my statement. However, the officers just took down the information and said there was nothing they could do at that point, since no physical damage had occurred. They told me to give them a call if anything else happened, and then they left. The security officer tried to track where the 2 kids skipped off to after leaving my door, but it was like they completely vanished from the building. The entire dense network of security cameras at every exit of the complex failed to capture another single glimpse of them. The next night, the overwhelming fear and tension drove me to make a bold decision. I knew I couldn't just stay passive and hide in this vague terror anymore. I decided to stay awake all night to directly confront and catch whoever was behind this twisted harassment. I dragged a sofa out and placed it directly opposite the front door of the apartment. I turned off every single light in the house, plunging the space into pitch-black darkness, illuminated only by the dim glow of my phone screen. I gripped my phone tightly in my hand, my finger resting right on the emergency speed dial for the police. The room was so terrifyingly quiet that I could hear my own heart hammering violently inside my chest. Time crawled by, 1 hour, then 2 hours of pure agonizing suspense. Out of nowhere, the wall clock struck exactly 1:30 in the morning. In the dead silence of the night, a sharp, metallic, rattling sound began to loudly echo from the front doorknob. The metal doorknob began to rattle violently, creating a deafening clatter in the dead silence of the night. Right after that, the pitiful sobbing of 2 children echoed through the gap at the bottom of the door. A child's voice pleaded desperately, "Mom, we're home. Please open the door and let us in." My fear instantly turned into rage, so I rushed right up to the door and yelled, "Your mother doesn't live here anymore. Get away or I'm calling the cops right now." The crying outside the hallway stopped dead with an eerie abruptness. The child paused for a few seconds, then turned toward the darkness of the hallway and said in a bone-chillingly cold tone, "Dad, it's a stranger, not Mom." A gruff, aggressive voice, heavy with the stench of alcohol, rasped from the dark corner, "Just use the key. That bitch is definitely hiding inside." My heart skipped a beat when I heard the sickening scraping sound of metal sliding into my lock. I watched in horror as the lock slowly turned a full rotation, letting out a loud click. The door began to swing slightly open from the outside, because I had completely forgotten to latch the security chain lock. A massive, muscular hand forced its way through the gap, trying to violently push the door wide open and storm into the apartment. In a state of sheer panic, I threw my entire body weight forward and slammed the door shut. I frantically dragged a heavy solid wood shoe rack nearby and jammed it tightly behind the door. The man outside threw his entire body into the door repeatedly, making deafening, thudding crashes echo through the room. He screamed his ex-wife's name in absolute fury and madness. It took nearly 15 long minutes before police sirens finally wailed from far away in the parking lot. The man and the 2 children managed to escape through the rear emergency exit of the building just in time. The property manager rushed to my room, her face completely pale, without a single drop of blood left in it, under pressure from the police. She was forced to reveal the whole truth about the previous tenant who lived here before me. That woman was the victim of a severely abusive and twisted domestic violence case. Her ex-husband was a highly unstable individual with severe mental issues who was obsessed with controlling her. To save her own life, she had secretly broken her lease and moved out in the middle of the night to flee to another state. The ex-husband still kept an old spare key from the past and was dragging his 2 kids along to hunt her down and take her back. After that horrific night, the man and the 2 children completely vanished from the apartment complex and never returned again. The police attempted to track him down, but he used fake information and was constantly moving across different states. I didn't dare stay in that apartment for a single moment longer for my own safety. I packed up all my things and moved elsewhere that very week to escape the haunting memories. While cleaning the kitchen counter, I looked back at the child's 3-leaf clover keychain I had found on my very first day. I realized it wasn't some harmless toy dropped by chance. It was a leftover trace from the previous times the ex-husband had brought the 2 kids to break into this apartment. Years have passed since that creepy ordeal came to an end. I have moved to a new, safer place, but the aftermath still haunts me every single day. Every night at exactly 2 a.m., even the slightest noise is enough to make me wake up in a panic. I realized just how close I came to a horrific tragedy. If that wooden shoe rack had slipped away that night, the biggest fear in this world isn't ghosts or mystical supernatural phenomena. It is the madness and twisted nature of a flesh and blood human being lurking in the dark. To this day, I am still a realistic person and don't believe in the paranormal. However, I always keep the habit of checking and locking my doors carefully before going to bed. I sit here writing these lines with a shaking feeling and a fear that is even greater than when I faced the incident itself. My mind is still tormented by an unanswered question. I can't help but wonder if that dangerous man and his 2 children are currently standing and knocking at the door of another poor, unsuspecting victim. I swear to you that everything I am about to share is 100% true. This happened to me about 2 years ago in a remote suburb in Oregon. It is the kind of experience that completely destroys your sense of security forever. It left me with such a deep trauma that to this day I can never drive alone on foggy nights. For a long time, I chose to keep this story to myself. Most people I told just shook their heads and said I was exaggerating, or that I made up some cheap horror movie script. People usually do not believe it until they have to face it themselves. But the sheer malice and calculation of people in real life is always much scarier than the movies. And the most terrifying part is, my entire nightmare started with a completely normal, harmless incident. At the time, I was working as a late-night DoorDash driver to make some extra cash for my overpriced rent. My job was incredibly boring, repetitive, and predictable. I usually started my shift at around 9 in the evening. I would drive through winding, hilly roads, surrounded by the dark, dense pine forests typical of the Pacific Northwest, to kill time on those long, lonely stretches. I usually wore headphones and listened to podcasts. About a week before everything went sideways, I accidentally dropped my old leather wallet at a Shell gas station off the highway during a late-night shift. At first, I was completely panicked because all of my ID and personal documents were inside. But after keeping an eye on things for a few days, I did not see any unusual activity on my bank cards. I reassured myself that someone probably picked it up and threw it in the trash, or that I had just dropped it in some bushes by the side of the road. I decided to just let it go, locked my old cards, and went right back to my daily grind. I had absolutely no idea that the wallet was not thrown away at all. It was in the hands of someone very patient, and he was using it to construct a perfect plan to hunt me down. 3 days after I lost my wallet, my DoorDash app started receiving some very strange orders. They always came in consistently between 11 p.m. and midnight. All of these orders originated from the exact same convenience store downtown. But the delivery drop-offs were always scattered houses up on the isolated Pine Hill. What stood out was that the tips for these orders were always unusually high. More noticeably, the customer notes consistently included highly interactive messages. "It is very foggy tonight, drive safely," or another one would say. "I turned on the porch light so you can find the house easily." At the time, I felt pretty good about it. I thought I was just lucky to have a generous and kind regular customer living in the hill estates. I happily messaged back right through the app. "Thank you so much. I am on my way with your food." Everything started spinning out of control on the 5th night. That was when I got an order for some drinks and a box of tissues. The customer note popping up on the app instantly sent a shiver down my spine. I know you always like drinking that blueberry energy drink from the Shell station. I left a can on the table for you. I stared at my phone screen, completely frozen. This person knew my exact personal habits. He even knew the exact gas station where I had lost my wallet a week ago. A heavy feeling of being watched immediately weighed on my mind. I started driving up the Pine Hill through the thick fog. Looking in my rearview mirror, I felt a constant sense of unease. There was a car with its headlights completely off, quietly tailing right behind me. The fog was too thick for me to make out the license plate or the shape of the car. I tried to calm myself down with the most logical explanations possible. I told myself maybe it was just an old coworker from my previous job messing with me, or maybe it was a regular from the gas station who recognized my car with the DoorDash logo. I intentionally brushed off the negative thoughts because the money from these orders was too good to pass up. I had no idea I was driving myself straight into a deadly trap. On the next night, the person's fake friendliness completely vanished. Instead, a threatening and high-pressure message popped up the moment I accepted the order. He messaged me directly through the app with an incredibly angry tone. "You are 10 minutes late tonight. Do not make me wait long like last time. Drive straight to the house right now." This message proved a horrifying truth. This person was using the tracking app to monitor every single meter of my movement on the map in real time. I felt terrified and realized my privacy was being severely violated. I immediately pulled over on the deserted roadside and tried to cancel the order on the app. At the same time, I sent back a firm, confrontational message to try and end this. "I will leave the food at the outer gate. I do not want to go inside your house anymore." Right after that, my phone screen notified me that the order had been updated. The tip was increased by $50, accompanied by a soothing message from the other side. "Sorry, I was just so hungry that I lost my temper. Please bring it inside for me. I left cash ready there." That brief silence, along with the large amount of money, made me hesitate intensely. I went ahead and fooled myself once again. I told myself that maybe the customer was just an eccentric, wealthy person with a volatile personality. That very carelessness pushed me down a path of no return. I pressed the gas pedal and kept driving to the address specified on the map. It was a large wooden house nestled deep inside an isolated pine valley. The place was enveloped in pitch darkness and fog so thick that I could not see more than 3 meters ahead. Contrary to all the promises in the previous texts, the entire house was as dark as a grave. Not a single porch light or living room light was turned on like the previous times. I stepped out of the car and walked up the creaking wooden steps in the eerie silence. When I got close to the door, I saw a neon pink sticky note stuck right on the window glass. On it, a scribbled line of text read, "The door is unlocked. Please bring the food and put it on the kitchen table for me. Your tip is placed right there." The moment I turned the doorknob and stepped into the pitch-black space of the house, my boundaries of safety completely collapsed. The bone-chilling cold and the heavy, musty smell inside made me realize a horrifying truth. This was absolutely not a house where someone was normally living. My fear at this point had turned into a real physical danger right in front of my eyes. I tremblingly turned on my phone's flashlight to light the way. The weak beam of light swept across the empty living room and stopped at the wooden kitchen table. I walked closer to put the food bag down, intending to turn around and leave immediately. But the exact moment the flashlight shone directly onto the tabletop, my heart felt like it stopped beating. A highly familiar object was sitting right there in the middle of the table. It was my exact brown leather wallet that I had lost a week ago. I stepped forward on trembling legs and reached out to open the wallet to check inside. All of my ID and personal documents were still completely intact, but tucked right against my ID card was a small, handwritten piece of paper with just 3 words. "Got you now." Utter panic exploded in my chest, and I immediately turned around and rushed straight toward the front door to escape. But right then, a loud, violent slam echoed, shaking the entire house. The thick wooden front door was slammed shut hard, and the lock clicked sharply into place. Someone had just locked the door from the outside. I frantically rushed over to twist the doorknob, using all my strength to kick the wooden panel, but it remained completely motionless. In a frenzy, I pulled my phone out of my pocket to call the 911 emergency line. The phone screen coldly displayed the words, "No service," due to the deep valley location. Amid the suffocating silence of the abandoned house, my phone suddenly began to vibrate violently. It was an incoming call from the delivery app itself, displaying the name of that customer. I pressed the answer button with hands dripping in cold sweat. Before I could even say a word, something a folder more horrifying suddenly happened. The sound of the ringtone and heavy breathing did not just come from the phone speaker in my hand. It was echoing simultaneously from the dark corner of the staircase leading up to the second floor right inside this house. That person was standing right upstairs. The voice from the phone reached my ears, low and raspy. "Look up here." Right after that, an eerie chuckle echoed down from the darkness of the stairs. I instantly understood the whole horrifying truth about this trap. He did not want the food at all. He wanted to hunt me down. He found my wallet, knew my home address, knew my driving schedule, and intentionally set up a fake account to lure me to this isolated place. I knew I could not hesitate for even a single second longer. I did not foolishly look up the stairs, but instead grabbed a metal toaster on the kitchen counter. I used all my might to shatter the glass window next to me. Ignoring the sharp glass shards digging into my bleeding palms, I scrambled out into the bushes anyway. I rushed straight to my car, started the engine, and slammed on the gas, fleeing for my life as the tires screeched wildly on the gravel road. After that horrifying night, the strange orders and anonymous calls stopped completely and mysteriously. I immediately deleted the DoorDash app and quit my job the very next day. I went to the local police station to report the entire incident, along with the address of that abandoned house. The police conducted an investigation of the house and told me it belonged to an elderly couple currently living in Florida. The house had been left vacant for several months. They did not find any camera footage or fingerprints that could help identify the perpetrator. To ensure my own safety, I used all of my savings to move to a different city. My new place is far away from that haunting Oregon suburb. My life gradually returned to normal, but no official explanation was ever provided. To this day, whenever I look back at the incident, I still can't help but shudder at my own naivety. I had easily fallen into a psycho's trap just for a few extra dollars of tip money. I am constantly plagued by questions that will forever remain unanswered. Who that person really was. How long he had been silently stalking me before he picked up my wallet, and what his actual intention was when he lured me into that empty house, if the kitchen had not had that glass window for me to shatter that night, or if I had hesitated and looked up the stairs like he said, I probably would have disappeared forever. I feel incredibly grateful that I am still alive to sit here and share this story. This story serves as a profound warning to anyone working as a solitary delivery driver late at night. Always stay alert to unusual generosity, because behind the darkness, there might be eyes hunting you down.